I believe a son ought to do greater than the dad. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
I believe that each generation creates greater things. You, a young man, your generation is going to create things way greater than what we were able to trump out to get to where we are now.
It's just something that I live. It's just something that I live. Hey, hey, hey. It's just something that I live that this world don't live. It's just something that I feel that this world don't feel. I gotta keep it real. J.E. Get 'em. Just something that I live that this world don't live. It's just something that I...
Welcome to the Let Bob podcast. It's your boy Ant, CEO of Let Bob Technologies. We got a special one for y'all today. We did the Juneteenth special on Mound, and I'm here in Mound personally. This has just been, if you could only see the stuff we've seen here, especially at the museum, seeing the beautiful black journey, the history, everything we stand for and represent, everything we talk about at Bob in itself, I'm actually in it. And I've gotten the pleasure of having a guest with me today who grew up a native here, who's gonna tell us about Mound, the experience of being in a black community dominated by the black mentality, and we're just excited. So my guest today is Mr. Darryl Johnson, entrepreneur, just a businessman, a mentor, an innovator, someone I think when you hear what he got to say, you're just gonna be so impressed. And we're just gonna have us a good discussion. Thank you for being on my show, Mr. Johnson.
I'm glad that you're finally at ground zero of African Americanism
I like
in
that.
the United States, historic Mound Bayou, Mississippi. Welcome. We're glad to have you here, and we're just excited about some of the things that you all are doing and the awareness that you're bringing to African Americans and to the world as a whole. We need you. We need your youth. We need your ideals, and we need the things that you're saying and doing.
I appreciate that. We had your brother, Mr. Herman Johnson, on last for Juneteenth. He was our Juneteenth special.
Right.
And he told us a lot about Mound Bayou. I never heard of it before watching the Teal movie. And so he was giving us some knowledge, man.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
I know.
You didn't know anything.
I didn't know anything. I'm like, what? I gotta go. I remember when I saw it on the movie, I told my wife I'm going there. And so, you know, God willing, I'm here. And so it's a beautiful experience. So tell us about how was it like growing up here? Like, what was that like?
That's a question that I get asked a lot.
Okay.
I grew up in a house where my great-grandparents on my mother's side, 4 of them, my mother's dad and my mother's mother, were early settlers that came into Mound Bayou during the founding of Mound Bayou.
Wow.
And knowing this, I knew that they had great respect. When I would ask one of my aunts about her grandmother, which was my great-grandmother, she would look like you could tell that she was spaced out everything that was around her just to begin to see what she was talking about.
Wow.
And you know, when she went there, I went there.
Oh, that's good.
And I could see what she was saying about the experience, and she would tell me about this lady, one of them, just one of the 4, dark-skinned, tall lady wearing a long white dress that's flowing. She would call it a flowing dress, and would walk down the streets of town and had this great respect that she brought. As many of the women that I would see as I was coming up, had great respect even in their dressing. Wow. So that was exciting for me to learn about the people that went before me, because they always say, if you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going.
Yep.
And it was good for me to know where I've been. These were former slaves that had gone from the bottom of everything and had flowed all the way to what they called the top. And so when my great-grandparents came, the ones that I'm talking about, they built a plantation, not just a house. It was the Simmons plantation.
Wow.
They had other houses. The only difference was that they treated the people on the plantation that they stayed on like brothers and sisters,
Wow.
and not from a mentality, I'm greater than you.
Yeah, okay.
And so these people, to hear about them and to be raised with this, it set an expectation and a mentality that I saw even on my brothers and sisters, not my physical brothers and sisters, but all of the people that were around Mount Bayou. We came up together with a pride of knowing who we were. When I would leave my house and ride my halfway broken bicycle that I put back together with my bare feet going to different places, I would pass the police chief. He said, hey boy, you know, and you had that camaraderie where the police chief knew your first name. He knew your mama, he knew your daddy, he knew you, and you better not get out of line. Or I would go to the store and I see Mr. Stringer, who owned the local grocery store. Or, you know, I would see the judge going to his chamber and I'd speak to the judge, you know. And so you knew all of these people. The persons that worked at the bank, the postmaster was my uncle. You know, you would have all of these people that were highly educated, that were friends of your family. And so when you were raised with that, you knew that there were no limits on you, that you could do anything. My daddy would tell me all the time, if anybody else did it, you could do it. He said, and you can do whatever you want to do. And that's why at 7 years old, I started my business.
So you was basically born an entrepreneur. You born an entrepreneur, you see all this ownership around you. You come up in a family who innovated, pioneered an entire community. You had no choice but to start out as a...
That's all I knew. I used to feel sorry for white people.
Okay.
Because, you know, when we were young in the 60s, you know, kids were made to stay outside. You don't go in the house.
Okay.
You come in the house to eat, go in the house to sleep.
Okay.
But the house was not where you're supposed to be. Outside was where you're supposed to be. And so, you know, I would come in the house sometime and the news went on. You could come in the house when the news came on.
Okay.
The national news.
Okay.
And they would show, I remember they would show certain times they had protests, and I would see, you know, black people marching, you know, the people that I knew, black people. But I would see white people on the side, and they were angry, and they were spitting, and folks were beating, and black people, and I would say, something wrong with these people. The reason they were doing this, the people that I knew were black, the people that I respected. I really felt sorry for them because it seemed as though they were acting out about something that was going on with them. And I didn't know any better at that time what actually was going on until I watched my dad and begged him to go to the civil rights meetings, and I would go to Fannie Lou Hamer's house with him. I would do certain things. I would follow him to meetings where they were planning on their strategy of how we're gonna go get around this roadblock that they put on, this roadblock that they did. So I would go with him, but until then, until I learned better, I really felt sorry for those guys.
Wow.
So this is the way I came. I came up with a different mindset than a lot of people. You know, I remember riding the train that stopped in Mound Bayou to the neighboring city of Cleveland. And this teacher who had come and stayed in Mound Bayou had taken up with me very well. And she asked, can I take Darryl to the store in Cleveland with me? And they said, yeah. I rode that train to Cleveland and got out, and not far from the train station where you get off was Jay's department store. We walked in Jay's department store, and when we walked in, the lady asked one of the persons that was there to help show them dresses and things, and the lady said a few things to them, and that lady turned around and says, "Y'all must be from Mound Bayou."
That's good.
And I wondered why. As a kid, how can they recognize people? We didn't have certain clothes on, but later on my mom told me this story about my granddad going to the local tractor shop in Cleveland. And he was picking up, my granddad owned the cotton gin. Okay. And so he was going to get a part. And the guys at the tractor shop knew him. And he stood in the back, he always wore nice hats. He stood in the back waiting his turn to get to the counter. This little young kid in the back of the counter saw my granddad standing up in the back, and he said to him, "Nigga, take your hat off." And my granddad just stood there, and my mom said that he didn't flinch. And the little boy said again, he said, "Nigga, did you hear what I said?" And by the time he said that, the other guys behind the counter saw who he was talking to, grabbed the little boy, the boy that was working behind the counter with them, put him up against the wall and says, "That's not a nigga, he's from Mound Bayou." And so it said something to all of them, that there's parts of when you in race situations, if you don't take up with the mindset of race situation, we can't take up with your mindset either. Because if you have great respect for yourself and who you are, then we must have that same respect.
I think you're saying that's a lot of wisdom in that statement, a lot of wisdom in what you're saying. And I think a lot of that is rooted in why you are an entrepreneur and why you've been able to do what you've been able to do, because that same attitude, especially the attitude of knowing who you are, knowing what you're here for and what your purpose is. If you truly know and believe that, then nobody can tell you any different. Because just like journeying in the 50s and the 60s and dealing with the environment that we dealt with as a black society, black community, everybody didn't accept what you was trying to do. Everybody couldn't see the future of what you're trying to do, but you have to keep pushing the vision. Stick to what you believe. Know that what your purpose and why you're here is real, and stand to it and stick to it. And I think what happens sometimes why I love talking to entrepreneurs is because that's just a common characteristic that you just understand and accept in the journey.
It's in us.
Yeah.
And the good thing about it, I learned early who we are, to the point that I saw people not knowing who they are.
Yes.
So a lot of times we have to announce to people their royalty, their greatness, who they really are. I like when Maya Angelou used to say, "Hey, black child, do you know who you are? Who you really are?"
That's good.
And I think that's important for us to know who we are as blacks that came from Africa. A lot of times we look at the negative things that happened that brought us over. But if we keep our eyes on God as we're coming over, He says to us, "Yea, though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death," if we would stick to this part, "I will fear no evil because God is with me." Even through that, I believe God was bringing royalty to America so that America could be great. If you ever want to make America great, like they said again, then take the chains off of who you've got in America, who built America, and stop coming against people and stop recreating the same stuff that kept us in the hole, and that's white supremacy and black racism. Stop recreating it, and let's all work together. Yep. Because there are eagles among us that got to fly. And I'm saying to you that African Americans, when we get together and not being stopped by this and stopped by that, there's some eagles that's going to fly. I watch you and I see an eagle that's flying, and that's going to bring some other eagles that's going to fly, that's going to do great things. I believe that's who we are. We just have to see it.
I agree, and I appreciate that. Sometimes it's tough being an eagle. You know, most eagles, they fly alone most times, and if they are not alone, they're with another eagle. I think, to your analogy, if we can position ourselves to, as eagles fly together, you definitely see a different change. With our company, our 4 pillars are education, community, finance, and most importantly, ownership. We believe those 3 pillars are the qualities necessary to get to what you and I are talking about. Specifically, community and education, a community of people who are educating ourselves about the power that we have, and then learning about finance to understand how we achieve ownership. And once we have ownership, we can see measurable change.
Exactly.
And I think that's why I wanted to come here, because I saw the black ownership. I saw the black businesses. I saw where it was not strange to this place. This is a place where it was founded upon that.
Exactly.
And so as a company who's talking about black-owned business, because that's what BOB stands for, we had to come and see it. And then the ability to talk to a owner here in this city was big for us. So let me ask this question: being in Mound Bayou and being an entrepreneur, having visions of different businesses you wanted to start or buy, or industries you wanted to participate in, was it easier because it was more people who looked like you here?
No.
Okay, that's good.
No, it
That's
wasn't.
good. Okay.
It wasn't easier. It's I had to go past all of that. I had to go past race. I had to go past people.
Okay.
My biggest and my first biggest experience in going past people was when I was 19 years old, and my uncle had a service station.
Okay.
I wanted to buy part of his service station and put a car wash there.
Okay.
He didn't have a vision for a car wash, so I had a vision to put a car wash at his service station. So I go to him and I say, "Can I buy this part over here?" And I put a service station over it. He said, "Sure. You want to do that? Sure." And so I did it, and I started doing it, and I checked the land out, and it was like 8 inches of this land that I thought I needed to get from another entity. And so I had to go to this board to ask them to sell me 8 inches.
Okay.
And the board refused to sell me 8 inches. I'm 19 years old. I'm a young man doing something nobody at that time had done. This young man, all of these people that I looked up to, and they refused me. I had to come back, lick my wounds, and decide whether I was going to let their no be my no, or their no be something that helped me get stronger. And I decided that I was going to learn from their no. I went further and found out that their no didn't mean anything anyway, because the 8 inches I needed was from somebody else. I ended up with it. I built my car wash, and I watched even some of them having to try to figure out if I beat them out. They spent money to find out if I cheated them out.
Wow.
And so, no, that wasn't a racial thing. That wasn't a race thing.
Correct.
That was just a people thing. You always go have opposition, but the oppositions ought to make you stronger.
Like that.
And so I learned to let opposition give me the opposite side. Cause see, every where there's smoke, that's one side. There got to be fire on the other side. So then where there's a negative, there has to be a positive.
Yeah.
If you get on a seesaw, everybody that goes down got to have somebody that's up. So there got to be another side to this thing.
There you go.
And that's what I learned for life. There's always another side. And so when the things look so negative to me, I'm trying to find out where's the bright side to this thing.
Yeah.
And so that's why I've seen it to be blessing. I walked into a bank and asked the man for a loan, and I wanted to do something, and this was in 1983. He had his foot on the he had his foot turned, it was noontime, he had his foot on the desk, turned, he was looking at his television, and he was the officer of the bank. And he was watching Erica Kane on All My Children. I remember that so well. He was watching her, and I was asking him for money. And he sat there with his head turned to me doing this. His fingers just moving. And he said, well, what you want this money for? And I told him what I wanted for. He never looked at me. He said, have you ever got a loan before? I said, yes. And I told him what bank I got that one from, and it was a small loan. He says, well, go back to that bank. Wow. And that's all he said to me, never turned around. So I got up from the chair and got to the edge of the door. And I turned around and I called his name. I said, I'm going back to that bank. I'm going to get the loan, but these 4 accounts that I hold here that had, and told them how much money that it equal up to, I say I'm going to empty all of those, and I'm going to take those back to that bank as well. And I could hear his chair turning as I left, and I wanted him to see the rump, and not the front. No, I didn't mean it. But anyway, but I wanted him to know. They called me. By the time I made it home, his secretary called me and told me I could come and get the loan. Do you think I wouldn't have got that loan?
Of course
no,
not.
I did not go to get that loan. I got pleasure in letting him know that the negative that he thought that he could use on me would not work.
And so that's funny, because that just happened to my uncle yesterday. He called me yesterday. It wasn't a loan. He was making a deposit, and they wanted to put a hold on his check. And he says, a hold? I have more money in this bank.
Exactly.
A hold.
Exactly.
And my uncle is really humble, and I tell him sometimes he should take on that attitude, because you didn't work hard to be the same. Respect for someone who, to your point, had those level of accounts that you had. Even if you didn't, a level of respect is due to all people.
Exactly.
That's just it.
Exactly.
Look at you and take the time to hear what you got to say, and even if he's not going to consider you, just.
And I knew it because he was white and I was black.
There you go.
That's what that came from.
Yeah.
Not because, because he would have done that with no problem with somebody that he do.
Correct.
And was the same race as well.
Correct.
But he did that to me because I was black.
That's why I talk about ownership is so important. Because
Exactly.
when we own things, that experience becomes really different when the person across the desk looks like you.
Exactly.
More fair.
Exactly.
And so the journey to ownership, and why I like to talk to other entrepreneurs and people like yourself, is to show that, to your point, you're still dealing with people.
Always. That's right.
Racism exists, but you're still dealing with people, and you still have to have fundamental foundation in certain things, so that when the loan officer won't look at you and they're watching television while you're trying to live out your vision, your fundamental foundation gave you other options.
Oh yeah.
But if you don't have other options, then that power that he's projected on you can become an illusion that is real.
But you know what was going on? One of the things that went on in my mind.
Yes, sir.
I always saw me.
That's good.
Higher, doing better than I was doing.
Yes, sir.
I never settle with what I was doing and what I could see in the mirror. I created my own mirror.
That's good.
I created my own image.
I like that. He said he created
And
his own mirror.
my image of me was what I believe God said about me. So I created that, and I stayed there, and I try to stick there. Because when I could see the black people here doing what, that was an image, that was a good image for me. But I want to be greater than that. I want to do greater than that. I believe a son ought to do greater than the dad. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
I believe that each generation creates greater things. You, a young man, your generation is going to create things way greater than what we were able to trump out to get to where we are now. And I just believe if we can keep looking at the real image as to who we are, I keep going back to us knowing who we really are.
I agree. So let me ask you this. If I'm not mistaken, you building a hotel here in Mound.
I'm part of
Look
a
at
group.
he eased up. It's why he's part of a group.
That's a group of me and my brother. I'm
Okay.
part of the little group that's yes. There's a need. There's a need, people. There's a great need. Don't you think that we need a hotel?
I do.
You came here, didn't you come here?
But that was so beautiful. Like when I was trying to find where I was going to stay, it wasn't in hotels in Mount Bow. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll stay in this neighboring city, which is Cleveland. But to talk to you and learn that, you guys are building one, that was very inspiring. Very inspiring. I don't think I don't know anyone who's built a hotel or had a part of the journey of building and owning a hotel. Anyone black, at least.
And I'm not thinking of that as just like, whoa, a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you, Lord, this is something that's needed.
Yes.
And this is something that we can get in our town. If my dad had told me, if anybody else did it, you can do it too.
There you go.
That rings out in me. So why can't I get a hotel?
That's good.
The Lord told me a while back, he said, start buying land. So we started buying land. And I had all of the enemies said, look at him buying up everything, just buying up. People. Yeah, people don't do that. I ain't worried about that.
That's good.
Because I want to hear what my image maker says to me. And I want to do it. So when it was time to build a hotel, guess what?
We
had the land.
That's how it's supposed to be. That's how
Yeah.
it's
So the
supposed to
land
be.
is there. We turning farmland into that because it's right at the edge of one of the oldest health centers in the rural health center, the oldest. The first rural health center in the country,
Wow.
Delta Health Center, and we'll put it right there beside it, the property that we bought.
Nah, that's good stuff. That's good, man. And for us, as a brand, our podcast is about exposing black-owned business, showing that, what we see on television with the athletes and the entertainers, that's good, that's great. It takes a lot of hard work and discipline to achieve what those guys have achieved. But I think what we want to show is that there's other pathways you can take to achieve these extreme levels of success, achieve financial freedom, ownership. And so we like to talk and find other black business owners to highlight them and let them tell their story. This podcast is not so much about pushing our agenda. It's more about highlighting what we believe could provide social impact.
You want me to tell you what I found out in all of the businesses? I've had a lot of businesses, and I own several of them now.
Yes, sir.
But one of the things I found out is just trust God. Trust God that He knows you.
Okay.
And He made you, and He know about you. And so, regardless of the stumbling blocks and other things that go on, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. But if you never took that one step, you're not on the journey yet. So if I see myself in this, I have to start walking toward it. If I'm not walking toward it, I won't get to it. And so I found that out. I started my flower shop. I got a flower shop.
Okay.
And I'm the master designer in the flower shop. But I started it when I was younger, I had little kids, and we had a resale shop in the building that I have the flower shop in. We didn't even have lights on in there, so I had the guy next door to I pay him so much, and run a cord, and we had a lamp on in this little thrift shop until the sun go down. So now I bought a flower shop, and we needed somebody to do flowers. Because the guy gave us the flower shop. But let me tell you how I ended up with the flower shop. The guy was mad because his wife left him. Left him with all the $20,000 worth of inventory at the flower shop he had just bought for the lady. Sold it to me, and I was kidding him. And I said, I'll buy it for $300. He said, sold. And I thought he was playing. So I said, yeah, $100 down, $100 a month. I ended up giving this guy 3 checks for $100 and told him that don't send this one through until the end of the week. And he told me, empty this thing out, and he emptied it out. And I emptied it out, and I ended up with the flower shop. That's how I got the flower shop. I have owned a hospice, actual hospice, inpatient hospice. I owned personal care, respite care, veterans personal care, veterans respite care. Right now, our checks every 2 weeks go out to almost 40 people.
Wow.
So that's where we are now, and God has blessed us tremendously. I closed my flower shop down. I thought that was stupid. You can't close a flower shop down and you the designer. They're gonna always call you. And so it's not closed, but I still, do that because God has blessed me. I'm the designer, and I didn't even know I had the gift to do it, but I do it.
That's generally how he works. You don't know it, but he knows it.
He knows it.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Johnson, we really appreciate you for coming on the podcast, giving us insight on history here in Mound Bio, giving us history on yourself, what entrepreneurship has been for you, the journey, what it's done for your family, and the position you're in today. So we very much thank you for your time and coming on the podcast.
We appreciate you coming to Mound Bio and then inviting me to be a part.
I appreciate it. So this has been another great episode of Let Bob Podcast. You can find us on all social media company at We Are Let Bob. You can find myself personally at I Am Let Bob. Appreciate you, and I'm out.
This world don't live. It's just something that I feel that this world don't feel. I gotta keep it real.